Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa and this channel is all about psychiatric drug withdrawal reactions and recovery. And it draws on my 7 years experience in this community and my own personal 4.5 year journey to recovery, as well as the probably thousands of conversations I've had at this point, both formally as a coach and informally just in my years in this community. And what this channel aims to do is provide hope as well as talk about the topics that come up repeatedly in conversations with people, because I figure if one person has a question about something or is talking about a specific topic, then there's likely many others doing the same thing. And so I address patterns and things that just seem to come up repeatedly. And nothing on this channel is meant to constitute medical advice. It's just drawing on these personal experiences. So the topic I want to bring up today was something that someone had requested, which is weight gain and withdrawal. And I think the weight issues are relevant and what many people are struggling with, and that's what I want to address here. But before I get started, I want to say I am coaching again. So I offer 30-minute calls and 60-minute calls, and you can book directly through the link in the description of this video. So I was on Facebook the other day, and you know how it shows like your memories will come up. So a 5 year ago memory came up. It was February 27th of 2020, and I was doing a Facebook Live. So if you know about my story, I was in my first withdrawal at that time, just straight off citalopram, and I was suffering a lot mentally, but I was much more functional. So I was in my second withdrawal. So I was working and I was teaching English online very, very part-time. And I think I must have been promoting that in this video, or that was the purpose. And the first initial thing that I thought when I saw this video pop up in my memories was, man, I was so skinny then. I mean, of course, that was the first thing that I noticed. But then the longer I paid attention and sort of watched it, the more I was like, it took me right back to that day. And I was so mentally gone in this video. So in that first withdrawal, I had a bad cluster of symptoms for about 6 months. And then a lot of my symptoms went away. And then what came back was this mental intrusive looping that I had basically second by second for years. And that's what caused me to reinstate after being off for 2 years. And so I had come out of not a very good relationship in this withdrawal. And I moved home with my mom after being on my own for 17 years because of this withdrawal and because of my breakup. And interestingly enough, like psychiatric drugs are known to cause metabolic issues, increase your chances of diabetes, cause weight gain. I'm someone that prided myself on being in shape. So my whole adult life, I always was an avid exerciser. I had a nice body. I had a flat stomach. I really would pride myself on my physical appearance, and exercise was really important to me. And I started taking these drugs in 2011 for situational depression. I was 29 years old at the time, and my physique was really nice, and I always had a lot of confidence in it. And then I noticed it was insidious because about 2 years into taking citalopram, someone had taken a photo at work, and I was in the background, and this was in 2013, and I was like, man, I look terrible in this picture. Like my body had really started to change. I was getting love handles. I was getting a gut. And I remember just being kind of mortified by this photo and being like, what is happening to my body? With no understanding of the effects of antidepressants on a person's weight. And you could argue that, I was getting into my 30s at that time. Maybe my body was going to change anyway, but I hadn't had a baby at that point. I wasn't in perimenopause or change of life at that time. So I'm pretty sure, in hindsight, it was the drug that was causing this insidious weight gain and changing of my physical body that I had prided myself in for many years. And so then I got to this weight, and I wasn't big, but I was big for me. And I remember in 2019, so I was a year into my first withdrawal. And that was when I was in a not a very good relationship, and I was feeling so unwell from the withdrawal. I moved home with my mom, And I was about a year and a half, almost 2 years off the drug when I filmed this live video, because it was in February of 2020 and I came off in April of 2018. And I was still doing so unwell mentally. And it's interesting because, like, I don't know, looking back. So looking back, I had lost about 15 pounds at that time. So my body shape had changed on these drugs, and then I was in this not very healthy relationship that I came out of, that I ended in 2019, moved home, filmed this video at early 2020, and I was thin. And I don't know if it was because I was so mentally just stuck in my head 24/7 that I didn't really think about eating that much, which is partially true, or it is true. But that might have only been the partial reason for, being this thin weight. But also, I did so much mental work. My routine to go to bed every night at this time was like 2 hours long. I had this whole thing. I would do all this deep breathing. I would do all this visualization. And a lot of it was around my physical looks, because I felt like they had changed from being on the drug and then in withdrawal. So I don't know if it was one of those things or both of those things. But anyway, I was at this low weight at this point in my life, but I was so mentally unwell. And I say to people now, I would rather be overweight than go back to that place mentally. But what's interesting, if you can call it that, is I reinstated at the end of 2020. So I had been off the drug for like 2.5 years when I reinstated, with a very small trial reinstatement later in 2018. That didn't go well. I tried to reinstate at full dose, knowing nothing about reinstatement at that time. And so I reinstated at the end of 2020. And again, I didn't really know much about reinstatement. I knew more than I did in 2018, but still like nothing like I know now. I didn't know about stabilization. I knew about microdosing reinstatements, but I didn't know about holding. I didn't know about kindling, really. Like, I didn't understand that. So I went back on citalopram at a low dose. I had reaction, but then I was up and down and off and on a bunch of times, again, not knowing that that was bad. And then was trialed on a bunch of other drugs, because every doctor kept saying, this isn't the right drug for your mental symptom. And I'm just accumulating more and more side effects, more and more reactions as this reinstatement is going on. I got dependent on benzos. My total reinstatement time between trialing about 10 different drugs and taking benzos consistently was about 4 months. So it was about October 2020 to February of 2021. And when I came off in February of 2021, my last dose of any drug was February 21st of 2021. So just over 4 years ago, I just became ravenously hungry. And so I started gaining weight, and I had, gotten to this thin weight. And then I was eating like 5 pieces of cake a day when I came off. I don't know if it was just from the reinstatement and the kindling, or if it was from benzos, because now I was also in benzo withdrawal. I don't know what exactly happened, but in my experience in talking to so many people, the more drugs you take and the more you have like reinstatements and multiple tapers, the more difficult it becomes, like symptom wise, to deal with subsequent withdrawals. And so I'm guessing it was maybe that, or just more neurotransmitters were imbalanced. I don't know, but I just was gaining and gaining, and I couldn't stop eating. So I gained weight, and then further down the line, I got pregnant, and then perimenopause and all these different things. So needless to say, like, my body has changed a lot, but these drugs cause shifts in metabolism. So I'm just going to refer to my notes here. I've talked on this channel about Chris Palmer's theory of mental health conditions. So he's a psychiatrist, and also on his theory about how SSRI antidepressants work. And I'm just going to refer to that here. So I'm just going to read here from my phone. So Dr. Chris Palmer, a Harvard psychiatrist known for his work on the metabolic theory of mental illness, has a nuanced view of SSRIs. He argues that the traditional explanation that SSRIs correct a chemical imbalance by increasing serotonin levels is overly simplistic and not fully supported by research. So He says, while SSRIs do increase serotonin levels by blocking its reuptake, this effect alone does not explain why they take weeks to work if they do work. The immediate increase in serotonin does not immediately relieve symptoms, suggesting that other mechanisms are at play. SSRIs may affect brain plasticity, and Palmer and other researchers suggest that SSRIs may help by promoting neuroplasticity or the brain's ability to change and adapt. Some evidence suggests they increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which supports neuron growth and repair. SSRIs impact metabolism and mitochondria. So Palmer's research focuses on how mental disorders are linked to metabolic dysfunction. He has suggested that SSRIs may have metabolic effects, potentially influencing energy production in brain cells and mitochondrial function, which could contribute to their therapeutic effects. It's interesting because he believes that mental disorders result from metabolic dysfunction and altered brain energy in the cells at a mitochondrial level, and that SSRIs because they directly impact this metabolism, somehow through that mechanism, they have a therapeutic effect, which explains why they take a couple of months to work or fully have their full benefit or full effects. So, and I wonder if this is what happens when people go off serotonergic drugs and often have a honeymoon period where they feel essentially normal or the best they've felt in years, and then they crash between 1 month and 3 months off. If it has to do with this metabolic, this metabolic change in reverse. I don't know. That's kind of a guess of mine. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to read that, because I thought it was an interesting theory. There may be people who have read that book. If not, you might want to check it out. It's more talking about mental illness than the effects of these drugs, but he does have this excerpt in there about SSRIs. I've mentioned many times before the complex interplay that seems to happen between hormones, female hormones particularly, and these drugs, the withdrawal and the taking of these drugs. Everything affects everything else. And it seems like one of the biggest triggers for waves in women is hormonal changes, drops in estrogen and progesterone before a period, like pregnancy, perimenopause, all those significant hormone segments of a woman's life. Psychiatric drugs can impact thyroid function, insulin resistance, and they affect stress hormones like cortisol, and they have some type of fairly significant effect on women's hormones. And so this is all interplays with metabolism. And so these drugs directly affect the way your body looks and your weight, and some more than others, like I mentioned, but they're definitely known to change or impact the metabolism directly. Yeah, I just want to say that there are so many people that have said, I would spend my life savings if it meant that these symptoms would go away, and I always said I would rather live in a cardboard box and or be 50 pounds overweight than ever experience the level of mental distress from these drugs that I experienced. It's life altering. And if you're struggling with weight, whether you're still on the drug or you're tapering, my advice, or what I did, would be, and I really should take some of my own advice now, is like I said, I did an incredible amount of mindset work in my first withdrawal. I really believe in the power of visualization, and that your cells listen, and your subconscious mind is always listening to what your thoughts and what you're saying and your intentions and stuff like that. And so I would purposefully set time aside every single night and visualize myself in the body that I wanted. And I remember I would walk around my apartment early in the morning, because I was teaching English early hours, and would have conversations with people over Facebook Messenger, like using voice notes, and say, I don't know, but I can eat whatever I want and I never gain weight. And again, whether that's part of the mindset work I was doing, or whether I'm just out to lunch and I just lucked out, I don't know, because I was not on a specific diet at the time, but I was able to be like the thinnest I had been in years without trying, essentially, other than doing this mindset work. And also too, I want to acknowledge that I was so stuck in my head all the time that I didn't really think about food. It just took up so much mental space to have this intrusive looping all the time. As far as diet goes, like I'm not in a position to give medical advice or diet advice, but from my experience and in my experience as a diabetic, the more that your blood sugar rises and drops like more dramatically throughout the day, even if you're not a diabetic, the more cortisol imbalances happen. So when your sugar drops, like say you have straight simple carbohydrates and not enough protein and fat, and it's kind of empty carbs, your blood sugar will spike as the insulin is trying to keep up and bring your sugar back down. And then if you haven't had enough protein and fat to sustain that kind of spike, then it'll crash. And when you start to drop really fast like that, it releases cortisol. So typically a blood sugar balancing diet is likely a good thing in withdrawal for this reason. And that blood sugar balance affects your hormones and your stress hormones and all those things. So that's what I tell people to be mindful of, just in my experience. And yeah, that is something also that I was working on when I was at a weight that I felt comfortable at, was I was really, really tightening up my blood sugar control. So, and I was doing a lot of mindset work. So I just want to say that, but also acknowledge that these drugs, because they're altering and imbalancing your neurotransmitters, whether you're reacting to the drug or you're in withdrawal, those type of things like the dopamine centers of the brain and all those pleasure reward things get altered. And so that can cause different types of cravings and just an altered satiety, sense of fullness thing going on. And so, yeah, it's definitely a real thing. So, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that and say that I had that as well in my second withdrawal, which I had only been on the drugs a total of 4 months at that point, when I became like ravenously hungry and full of cravings. And my 7 years of a drug and the withdrawal from that wasn't the same. But again, I don't know if that's because I was doing all this mindset work and really balancing my blood sugars, and also whatever else I mentioned. I can't even remember now what I was doing for, oh, I didn't have a lot of mental space to think about food because it was just tied up in intrusive thoughts. So I don't know. There's a lot of factors there, a lot of variables, but definitely experienced that in my second withdrawal, and my body changing when I went on citalopram in the first place. So yeah, I hope you guys are doing okay, and let me know your thoughts on this topic, and I'll see you next time. Bye.